Intro.
All right. Hi. I can't. Okay, hold on. Lincoln, help me out, buddy. My name is Thor Nichols. I'm a woodworker, been doing it for about 6 years now, and I'm also a tiny house builder. This is Build Something, Designing Small. Designing Small is a course that was funded by the Lowell Cultural Council, and it was a hybrid virtual and in-person course aimed at teaching local youth of Lowell from 5 different neighborhoods the fundamentals, the principles, and the parts of building small or designing small, and not just in houses, but also in everyday stuff. So what we were aiming at was we were trying to get these kids to be involved in the process of identifying needs, designing solutions for those needs, incorporating those needs into what they're going to be doing in their everyday life or what they're going to be doing in their future. We were encouraging them to make mistakes and then to go back to the drawing board, have some fun, and go at it again until you found something that worked for you or worked for your solution. So in this course, we were challenging these youth to think about the benefits and the challenges to living in a space that's smaller than the average here in our part of the world, in our part of America. We wanted them to think about things like what would be solved, what problems would be solved by downsizing things in your life, both now and in the future, or like people around them or people that they know. What benefits would they have to downsizing or living smaller, or at least trying to incorporate some of those techniques into their lives? There's also challenges involved with living small, like where do I put all my stuff? Or where do I go to the bathroom? Or things like that, or like, how can I build something for myself? Or I don't have enough room for all the things that I want. What do I do? So in this course, we tried to both get them amped on coming up with solutions for everyday problems that they might face in their current situation, or if they were to someday live on their own in a world where, you know, things are a little more expensive, or there is a little bit more limited of space. So living small, the concept of living tiny, is not a new thing. For the vast majority of human existence, people have lived tiny, they live small, they've lived mobile. It's just the way human beings have lived on this planet up until fairly recently. But even still now, people are living tiny, or they're going tiny, or they're at least thinking about downsizing or incorporating some of these techniques. You got to think, you know, people who don't have the money to have a big house, or the people who are outside all the time and they don't need a big house, or those people who don't have a lot of things, they don't need a big house. Also retirees wanting to not be tied down in one spot or not have a big house to clean anymore, or kids that are getting out of college and they have a lot of debt and they don't want to take on a mortgage. There's lots of reasons in today's world to go tiny. It's not just about living as a minimalist, it's about finding those things that make you happy. So the reason why I feel connected to this particular subject is because over the course of my life, I have lived tiny myself. I've lived in cars, I've lived in tents, I've lived in trailers, I've lived in teepees, yurts, dormitories, tree houses, and a boat. I pointed out to these kids that even looking out into nature, to the non-human creatures on this planet, a lot of them actually tend to build their own tiny houses as well, whether it's something that's stationary or something they move around with. So, for example, like a beaver, they build their own tiny house and they live in it. Bees, they build beehives. It's kind of like a dormitory. And we're also thinking about things like birds, swallows. They build these nests up in the eaves to keep themselves safe. They all live together in these mud huts that they also build for themselves. So the first component into building or designing a tiny space is going to be just that. It's the planning and the designing. So you're going to think about where you're putting it, why are you doing it, how are you doing it, what are you building it out of? These are all considerations that you need to have kind of like figured out, or at least have an idea in that space before you start doing any of the work. Plan first. So the second part of this is going to be your framing and your foundation. By framing, I'm talking about that skeleton that holds the whole structure up. And by foundation, I'm talking about what does it sit on? Is it sitting on a trailer? Is it sitting on the ground? Is it floating in the water? These are all considerations you need for part 2 of it in the framing and the foundation. So part 3 of this is your roofing and your siding. And this really just entails anything that protects you and all of your stuff from the elements. The 4th part is going to be your insulation and your access. And by access, I mean your doors, your windows. These are the things that augment your roof and your siding to keep those elements off of you. So the last part of this is going to be the interior design and the colors, which are actually super important because these are the things that really tie the whole thing together and they make a tiny house into a home. So some of the benefits to living tiny is the fact that generally it costs less, it's easier to maintain. A lot of these tiny spaces are portable or movable, and it helps you just live more simply and not put so much emphasis on stuff. Some of the downsides of living tiny are just what you'd think. I mean, most of us have entirely too much stuff. So the first thing is you got to figure out what to do with it and how to store it. Other things are, sometimes they're hard to insure. Sometimes people aren't open to the idea of living tiny or putting your tiny house somewhere. Also, your whole house can get stolen. And then there's some of the creature comforts of like, do you live with somebody else? Do you have space away from those people? Where do you poop? Those are all things that are hugely important when you're considering living tiny. So one of Build Something's biggest supporters over the years has been Maxine with the Low Cultural Council. And she has a quote that she's fond of signing off with, and it's, do what you can, where you're at, with what you have. And I think that encapsulates this idea of designing tiny, living small perfectly, especially in a world where, sometimes you just gotta make do.